for everyone to be proud of who we are. And the people who we're not enough for, then I don't see why we should be worrying ourselves about that too much. Because I suspect that I could be any version of myself and still not be enough for them. So I'm here today for Autistic Pride because I refuse to be anything other than human. And being neurodivergent is a human condition. It is part of what makes humanity what it is. Because humans are not cut and dry off of a factory line. We are individuals to the point that we can't even fully understand what each other's experience is because we have no reference point within each other's experience, you know? Even an autistic person can only to a certain extent infer what another autistic person experiences because we have some overlap. But as human beings, we are all individual. The whole point of neurodiversity is that there are 8 billion different brains. That's for the 8 billion different people. 8 billion different people, 8 billion different brains. Some of us just have that shared overlap, and that's where things like autistic culture rise from. That's where our refusal to be ashamed rises from, because
they explicitly opted against identifying people as the gender they identify as, only identifying them by their sex at birth. And other research that I found has been entirely anti-autistic, anti-LGBTQ+. One of them that I had the immense and unending joy of reading all the way through for my book claimed that autistic people who claimed to be queer but had never had a relationship couldn't actually be queer. And also that all of these autistic men who were claiming they weren't straight were actually straight but just frightened of talking to girls. Ultimately, a lot of this research is trying to figure out why we are the way they are, rather than accepting the fact that we are the way we are and trying to find ways to support us. And that annoys me. It makes me furious because I don't care why I'm autistic or why I'm queer or why I throw those things together. I just am. I don't need an explanation. I need a foundation. I need so whatever the reason, knowing there are so many of us out there are so many young people like me growing up trying to figure this stuff out, they have to practice to like have these conversations, to actually put something together that's aimed at ways that we can navigate these topics. Now for me, figuring out my identity and my space in the queer community came almost entirely.
Guys, my name is Marsha Martin. I am actually autistic, quite likely have ADHD also. I have 3 beautiful daughters who are also autistic with ADHD. We have a wonderfully chaotic household. Here are 2. This is 66% of my offspring. And I want to talk to you guys today about why it's really important for me to loudly advocate for my children. Growing up, I can say that disability was not something that we discussed often, particularly within my community. Autism was a word that was said in hushed tones around the dinner table when my firstborn was obviously different, quote unquote. And then fast forward to 3 autistic children and my diagnosis later, my own diagnosis years later, there is one thing that my children will always know, and that is autism will never be a bad word in my household. It's never going to be something that we avoid saying in front of the children. It's never going to be something we dress up in softer language because we're worried that knowing they're autistic might damage their self-esteem. because I actually believe the opposite. Oh. I believe what damages our children is teaching them that a fundamental part of who they are is something that everybody else is allowed to speak about except them. So we say autistic in our house a lot, and we talk about it often and casually, and in fact sometimes I tell my children, you are very autistic. You are the most autistically autistic autist, just like mummy, just like me. And aren't we amazing people? And I want them to hear the word autism and the word autistic spoken with joy, because it usually isn't. I want them to hear it spoken with affection, with pride. I want them to hear autism spoken about in the same way that we speak about all of the other parts of ourselves that we love. And that means we have to be intentional, because our children are growing up in a world that will give them plenty of messages about who they are. They will absorb everything. And some of those messages will come from school, local authorities, some will come from professionals, some will come from society, media, social media, and some will come from that one auntie at the family gathering who suddenly became an expert in autism without doing any kind of research or getting any qualifications, because they were ignorant and they believe autism isn't real. Yes, that happened. I was also advised not to have more children after the first one. Pretty certain I had a PDA profile, so that advice didn't have the intended effect. I've heard we never had autism in our day. I've heard that child just needs discipline, but she doesn't look or act autistic. And in those moments, I believe we have a responsibility to correct those ideas. And I'm never quiet about those corrections. I'm always ensuring that I do them in front of my children, in the presence of my children, where my girls can hear me shut down any ignorance or intolerance. My girls always hear me fiercely advocating for their humanity, and oftentimes it's against people who sadly have forgotten their own humanity. Because every time someone says something about our children that is incompatible or incongruent with the self-love that we are trying so hard to instill in them, that we are trying so hard to build in them, we have a choice. We can protect the comfort of the adult, because it's usually an adult, who said something, or we can protect the developing identity of our children. And I choose my children every time. They are listening, and they are learning how to understand themselves by watching how we respond to them when the world misunderstands them. And the aim is always to challenge shame, to challenge stigma. And my girls must see me refuse to allow anybody, be it family member, teacher, professional, stranger, to make them feel that being autistic makes them less worthy of respect. Our children deserve a pride that does not require them to leave any part of themselves behind. The language we use is so important because our voices eventually become their inner voices. So, I want my daughter's inner voice to say, there is nothing shameful about me. There is nothing that needs to be hidden. There is nothing about my existence that requires an apology. I am autistic, I am loved, and I belong. And I'm proud. Autism will never be a bad word in my house. Thank you.
I said to her, what do you mean by that? She said, Dean, you were easily the most challenging child I ever worked with, but you were also the most rewarding. And throughout my childhood, people were very good at listing all the things Dean had done wrong today, but not so good at looking at what my needs might have been. And this is relevant today because I still hear from families, I still hear from parents, I still hear from young people who tell me that their experience is exactly the same. That they are still being judged in those ways, that they are still having their behaviour looked at rather than their needs met. My first teaching assistant, I was very privileged, very privileged to have a teaching assistant through primary school. And my first teaching assistant worked with me for about 9 months and then went off saying she had a new job in the New Forest. None of us believed her. We knew she'd offer a health spa to get over me. They brought in someone who was paid danger money and she stayed a bit longer. Now, the story goes that I'd always assumed she'd run off to this health spa. About 5 years ago, I got a message on Facebook from somebody claiming to be my primary school teaching assistant. So I asked her some screening questions to make sure she wasn't a scammer, because of course you would pose as someone's TA to scam them. It turned out it was her. So we had a reunion in a health spa in the New Forest. It came full circle. And she said to me that on her first day of working with me, the headmistress said to her, "Your job description is 3 words." She said, "Well, what is it?" And the head teacher said, your job description is keep Dean quiet." And that's what inclusion looked like in Gridge in 1994. You could be in the room, but my goodness, don't bring your needs with you. You could be in the room, but my goodness, don't cause a fuss. So I got to sit and watch lots of other people being included, but weren't necessarily included myself. Do I think we've come on a great deal from then? Not as far as we need to. And so many people are talking about supposed autistic school refusal, and it infuriates me, because it suggests that the child has made a choice. It suggests that the child has said, "Well, I could go to school today, but Loose Women's on at 12:30, so I think I'll swerve it. I'd much rather find out what Colleen Nolan thinks about Nigel Farage." No child is sitting there thinking that. There's no such thing as a child that doesn't want to learn.
Next one is Perry Gordon.